Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us tonight for some great opportunities to learn together, some great insights together on governance, being on boards and things like that. The seminar tonight is the first of what we hope will be an annual training for all commissioners. We've received feedback from you that you like more robust training on topics that affect your commissions at every meeting. Topics that will increase your understanding, and effectiveness as a commissioner. Therefore, your feedback has determined which topics we're going to discuss tonight. These include the role of staff versus the role of volunteers or elected officials, the open meeting law, conflict of interest as it is related to state law. When searching for the best person to provide this training, Professor David Schultz's name was brought to us by one of our own commission members who had previously attended one of David's seminars. Word of mouth, that's the best, right?
It is always the best.
A review of his credentials makes it abundantly clear he is an expert in the areas he will present tonight. So now I'm going to read from your biography. So correct me if I'm wrong here, okay? David Schultz is a Hamline University professor of political science who teaches across a wide range of American politics classes, including public policy and administration, campaigns and elections, and government ethics. David is also a professor in the Hamline and University of Minnesota Schools of Law, where he teaches election law. David is the author of 30 books and 100 plus articles on various aspects of American politics, election law, and the media and politics. He is regularly interviewed and quoted in the local, national, and international media on these subjects by agencies including the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post, The Economist, and National Public Radio. His most recent books are Presidential Swing States, Why Only 10 Matter, Election Law and Democratic Theory, and American Politics in the Age of Ignorance, Why Lawmakers Choose Belief over Research. A three-time Fulbright scholar who has taught extensively in Europe, Professor Schultz is the 2013 Leslie A. Whittington National Award winner for excellence in public affairs teaching. Please welcome Professor David Schultz.
Thank you very much. I probably, if I wanted to add one more thing to my bio, I also have worked in local government back in New York, where I'm from, and I had the greatest job in the world. I was the city director of code enforcement. And really, really loved that job a lot. I've also worked as a housing and economic planner. So here's what I want to do today, is to walk us through a few different things here. Obviously, as you've indicated here, you want me to talk a little bit about issues regarding, let's say, open meetings laws, sort of like board versus staff relationships, conflicts of interest and so forth. But I also think it's important just to sort of set some kind of context here, because I think the context of understanding something about what you do in terms of a board and in terms of commissions you're on is truly tremendously important. And again, I'm going to try to make this as interactive as possible. And you'll notice, I think everybody has a copy of my handout. Am I correct? All right. Okay, just so to let you know what the handout is here, is that I'm going to loosely follow the main parts of the outline here as I work it through here. Certainly I may not cover all of this in detail, and I know I can't. But then you'll notice starting on page 5, I have a series... Pardon me?
Are there any more handouts?
Okay, okay, good. And as you're handing them out, I'll say that on page 5, I also have on page 5 and on page 6 a series of what I'm going to call sort of problems or hypotheticals. I'm not going to get to all of them again tonight, but enough of them just to stimulate conversation. Because the whole point that what I want to be able to do tonight is to get you to talk to me, get you to talk to one another, to think about a variety of issues. All right, now, the way that I want to organize this material is to open it up here by getting us to think about, I think, two fundamental questions. Question number one is to really ask, what it means to be sort of an ethical, let's say an ethical and legal public official. That is, as a public official serving on a board, serving on a commission, being on an advisory board, I think all of us want to be within what I call that legal zone, that ethical zone. At the same time, so we're going to try to figure that out. And then the second question, we're going to just set up very basic here. In terms of, before we move on to the main part of our material, although this is still important also, is to really ask, what's unique about serving in the public sector? You know, are there some core sets of values that we need to be thinking about? And where I want us to start, it may sound like a silly example here, but go to page 5. It's my first problem here. And I get to pick on, of course, people out here. So I get to pick on, let us say, this gentleman right here, okay? And I don't know anybody's names here, so if I'm disappointing you, please forgive me here. So what is your name, by the way? Paul. So Paul decides to adopt a new philosophy as he serves on, and what commission are you on? On the county commission. Okay, so he decides to adopt a new philosophy. And he's told you that this, Paul says to me, I'm going to do nothing illegal, and I will never break the law as a public official. But you also say to me, if it's not prohibited by the law, I'm going to feel free to do whatever I want. So your philosophy is to scrupulously follow the law, no more, no less. Would we describe Paul as an ethical public official? Why not? I see your head shaking here. Why not?
I think that there are ways that you can work around the law and not be ethical. Ways that you can get around the law and not be, not do something that's really good for the people that you serve.
Okay, good answer. Anybody else want to venture? Yeah, go ahead.
I'm really skeptical of people that use an external source of ethics
Uh-huh.
rather than their own internal code.
Okay.
That was a red flag for me.
Okay, good. Others want to start comment? Yeah.
It's because of how many people he's told this to.
Okay. So what if he's told it not just to me, but he's made it known to everybody that that's his philosophy as a public official? Is that okay? No. Recall. Okay. What are we worried about? What are we worried about? Who's somebody who says, I'm just going to follow the law scrupulously? Again, the question I'm asking here is, would we consider that to be enough to be A, an ethical public official, and B, somebody who we would describe as a good public servant? What do you think? Or is there something else required? Yeah.
That's where you end up in court,
Okay.
because he's done something that he thinks is theoretically not against the law,
Okay.
but somebody else takes exception to it, says that's libel or
Okay.
slander.
Okay.
Now you're in the courts.
Okay, good answer. Anybody else? Go ahead, 1 and 2, go ahead.
Not acting in the public interest. If that's his philosophy is not what's best for the public, it's what's best for you.
Okay, good answer.
Ethics doesn't have a hard line that you draw in the sand.
All right.
So it's not a matter of doing it right or wrong necessarily.
Okay.
Or legally or illegally. Ethics is a broader range of what's proper.
Okay, good. Okay, all right, go ahead, yeah.
I would also think that maybe I could bind him in some way
Uh-huh.
that was legal. I could sway him to do what I wanted within the law.
Okay, good answer. Okay, yeah.
I just wouldn't trust him.
Okay. Now, is it because you know Paul or for some other reason? Okay, what I'm getting at here, let's start with a baseline here. In order to be an effective, good, or ethical public official, is it first necessary to obey the law? Yeah, okay, that's a good, okay. Now, here's my second question. After we say that is sort of our baseline is to obey the law, are there some additional things we would expect of Paul besides him just saying, I'm just going to scrupulously follow the law? Something else that we would expect from him in order for us to say you're truly ethical in the work that you do, or and I'm gonna maybe blur terms here, that he's not just ethical, but he's also what? He's also, let us say, maybe even effective in terms of what he does. But we say with ethical. What else could we maybe add to it? Is there something else we can think of?
Knowledgeable.
Knowledgeable. Okay, that's not a bad thing. All right, good. What else?
Compassionate.
Pardon me?
Compassionate.
Compassionate's a good answer. Good. All right. Fair. Okay. Honorable. Great answer.
Gutsy.
Gut. All right, gutsy could be it. Okay, so let me press it and or tweak this a little bit differently. What I'm interested in Hamlin, and I've spent most of my career in Hamlin talking about, is trying to understand, are there some values that are unique to the public sector, the public service, that are different than they are, for example, in the private sector. And one of the ways I play with this sometimes is I do some silly kind of examples out here. And I might ask the question, for example, let us say Paul in his other life is I don't know, he is works someplace in the private sector, and he works at a job where he's on a commission basis. Let's maybe you're selling television sets at some place like that, or plasma TVs, and your boss says, go out and sell a zillion plasma TVs and you get a commission for every one. Is that okay? Shake your head and say yes. Yeah, it is. That's the private sector, isn't it? The private sector is all about saying it's okay to do that. But what I'm now going to start, it's about what? It's about self-interest. It's about what? It's about motivating people in terms of getting them to think about how they can sell things. Right? What I'm more interested in is, are there some values that uniquely define what it means to be in the public sector, that distinguishes what we do here from what we do in the private sector? In a sense, are there some guiding values, guiding principles? Is there an ethic, some kind of an ethic that structures what we're supposed to be doing? Can anybody think of anything? Yeah.
Just plain service.
Yeah.
What is service to the public?
Yeah.
Service is the operative word.
I think so. Service is one good answer. But yeah, there.
Aspiring to a fiduciary standard.
Yeah, I was going to say, my students at Hamlin think I'm really old-fashioned and quaint, and maybe I am. When I say that, we start off with sort of this concept of saying that in public service, what are we? We're fiduciaries for the public. We are acting in their best interests. Unlike in the private sector, or is it okay to pursue my own self-interest? Yes, it is. But in the public sector, it's not about my own personal interest. It's about what? Serving the public good. So what we're starting to get at here is think about an opening concept here. One concept is to say that it's about perhaps serving the public good. It's about being a fiduciary. What else can we think of as important maybe values that might be critical to public service of the public sector? Can anybody think of any?
Discernment.
You take an oath.
You take an oath, yeah. An oath that says what? You're going to do what? Yes, somewhere out there. Aren't you saying you're going to follow the law? You're going to follow the Constitution? Yeah.
As much as possible, the public needs to know what you're doing. It needs to be an open, transparent process.
Yeah, openness and transparency. You're right. If a private business wants to make decisions and it doesn't let the public involve them, is that okay? Well, yeah, they're allowed to do that. They're a private business. But somehow here, guess what? This is the public sector, and that the people have a right to know. So openness, transparency, being a fiduciary for the public, serving the public good. What else can we think of, perhaps, in this line here that might be other critical values that should be important? Can anybody think of any?
Good listening skills.
Good listening skills are never bad. They're never bad in any field that we have. But of course, a public sector, I think they're really critical because part of what we're doing is what? Listening to the public. I think it's a good answer. Anybody else?
You have to listen to everybody equally, not just the powerful people in the community, but people who are disenfranchised, or,
Yeah.
we need to listen to the public equally.
Yeah, and that, I was going to say, that's an incredibly hard skill to have. You know, some of you know I was here about a year and a half ago or so, you know, with the community assemblies. And one of the things that we were working on is the idea of saying that, and there's nothing wrong with the squeaky wheels, the people who always you hear in City Hall. The harder part is getting to those people who don't usually have the opportunity or don't feel like they have the voice to speak. And so trying to listen to those who don't oftentimes talk or have maybe the faint voice or something like that. You know what I'm getting at here is really important. But what I'm getting at here on my handout, look at my handout here on page 1 here. It says introduction here. And I'm asking the question, what is our role as public servants? Who is it we serve? What is our relationship to the public? I first start with suggesting 3 things. When we think about our relationship with the public, I'm going to argue it's a threefold relationship. Okay. 1, it's our relationship with the public as citizens, as customers, and as partners. And the reason why I mention this, does anybody remember an old character with Lily Tomlin? She used to play an operator called Phoenicia. It's a really old character. I can't use this one with my students anymore. Okay, they have no idea what I'm talking about. Because also when I start to talk about an operator and a phone, they look at me like, what are you talking about now? Or something like that. But there's this great routine with Lily Tomlin. She plays Phoenicia. And she talks, and she's making fun of AT&T. And she says, we're the phone company. We don't care. We don't have to. And at the time, but it was a big, bloated company that had a monopoly. And what she was getting at is the concept of saying that, think about it. Companies, oftentimes, when we say businesses, or rather, government should be run like a business, my point is, what kind of businesses are you talking about? There are good ones and there are bad ones. And our relationship with the public is first as a citizen, which is different than simply as a customer. As a citizen, what? They're our bosses. They have a right to ask certain things of us. They have expectations in terms of what we're supposed to do, unlike just being a customer. Second, though, the public is our customer in the sense that what? They should expect to get good service from us, which means, for example, if they call us under the right circumstances, if we're allowed to, we call them back. So there's that part. But also think about how our role with the public as partners. I used to say to people, when they used to call my office as Director of Code Enforcement, I would say that, yes, I'm here to help you solve your problems, but we're also a partner with you in the community to work with you together. And so what I want us to think about here is, again, just want to work through this quickly here, is that think about our role as public servants, board members, council members, commissioners. We're what? We interact with the public as citizens, customers, and partners. Additionally, what I talk about here under let's say, in Roman numeral 1E, you know, what's unique about public sector values, that without going through all this bigger, long discussion here, part of what we have here is that distinguishes us from those people in the private sector is what? We have certain obligations. Obligations that are dictated by what? We take an oath to follow the U.S. Constitution, the Bill of Rights, the Constitution of Minnesota, the state laws, et cetera, the laws in Red Wing. But additionally, we have a set of values, a core set of values that are about what? Following the Constitution, respecting rights, being a trustee for the people. Following the law is important, but following the law is not enough. We also have an obligation to act ethically. For anybody who says, and what Paul would just say to me, all my job is as a public servant is just to minimally follow the law. Most of us wouldn't describe as enough. There's something more to that. All I want to establish in this first part here, before I move on, and I'll just take a couple of quick questions here, is that if I had more time, I would talk about what are the values that should guide our concepts when we're on boards. Those concepts of public service, of openness, of transparency, of being fiduciaries for the public. It's about saying that it's not about me, it's about the people that I'm serving. And all of that should frame how we think about our job. Okay, questions, comments, observations? All right. All right, good, all right. So that's the first, that's establishing that. And again, I threw a few questions in here so we can think about this in terms of how it distinguishes us from what? From the work that we do in terms of what we do in the private sector. All right, so let me ask a couple of silly questions here in terms of, well, actually, let me actually go into Roman numeral 2 and maybe come back and do some problems here. All right, so one of the other things that I try to get us to think about here is in terms of our role on boards, committees, and in terms of governance. And let me tell you a story, and tell me what's wrong with this story. About a decade ago, I was brought into the city of Maplewood to do some work with them. There was a point when the city of Maplewood in Minnesota was featured both in the Pioneer Press and in city pages, and the headline in both of them was "The Most Dysfunctional City in the State of Minnesota." And I was asked to come in to go talk to the people on the city council and on the board, and some of their board members. And I had this really fascinating conversation with one of the city council members. And let me tell you the conversation, and tell me what you think about it. So, the city council member, before he was on city council, used to go to hang out at a bar with a bunch of his friends. They'd have a few beers, and they would talk all the time about how crooked they thought that the members of the city council of Maplewood were, how they were a bunch of thieves, et cetera, like that. And they'd swill some beer, and they would say all kinds of horrible, nasty things about the city of Maplewood and its public officials. Let me ask a question. Remember, he's not on city council yet. Is that okay? Yeah. Why is it okay? Public figures. Okay. Anybody else? Great. First Amendment. Yeah. God bless America. Don't we have a right to carp about our government? Yeah, we do. Okay. So here's what became fascinating for me. So now he gets elected to the city council for Maplewood, still goes to the bar on Friday nights, hangs out with his friends, and continues to complain about the fact that what? All the members who work in Maplewood are a bunch of crooks, complains bitterly about his council members, describes the fact that the regular people like the police commissioners, fire commissioners, are on the take, et cetera, like that. What do you think of that? No, doesn't he have a First Amendment right to do that? Doesn't he have a right to go carp about those people?
The specifics sound like actionalis, but it's not true.
Okay. What about the rest of you? What do you think? Doesn't he still have a right to complain bitterly? And he would actually tell these people also and say, I think the decisions that we reached were wrong. And I'm going to do my best to undermine those decisions. Yeah.
He has a place. There's a process for doing that within the government that he's working for.
Okay.
And I think you can have those opinions. He just has to voice them in a way that's open and serving the best interest of the public.
Okay.
So if he has a question about a legitimate question, then that's not at the bar swilling beer with his buddies. It's at commissioner concerns or.
Okay. Good. Others?
Does the city have an ethics committee?
They did not.
They should have.
They should. Yes. Okay, that would have been a great answer there. Okay. What I'm getting at here is how about some of you here? So maybe some of you serve on, and I know all of you serve on some board or commissioner advisor organization like that. And so let's say after one of the meetings, you're really particularly unhappy, or you disagree with what the planning commission did and you're on it or something like that. And I don't know, you go back to some bar, you go to a coffee shop or something like that, and you're talking to a bunch of other people and say, those decisions were really horrible. And the reason why my other board members did that stuff, you know what? They're crooked. They're on the take. They're not too smart. What do you think?
You're creating divide.
Okay.
You're not finding any kind of solution. You possibly have other information that might not be open to the public yet, and you're sharing that off with other people.
Okay, good answer. Okay, others? Yeah.
You function independently, but you're also part of a group.
Uh-huh.
You support the group as well as the output of that group.
Okay.
Issues within
Okay, good. Okay, so what I'm getting, okay, you had your hand up also or not?
No.
Okay, what I'm getting at here is a question of, when I serve on these different bodies, what duty do I have to those bodies?
Well, I think you need, there's a certain amount of loyalty you need.
Yeah.
Loyalty is required to therein serve the public interest.
Okay.
If you have an issue, you don't go out and announce it, you go to that person.
Okay.
And address it.
Okay.
Address it in a meeting.
Okay, good answer. Okay, others? Yeah.
I think there's a need to work with your fellow board members
Mm-hmm.
respectfully,
Okay,
and that's not being respectful.
okay. Is it okay to criticize though?
Yes, yes,
Is it okay to question?
yes.
Okay. So when do we maybe cross the line?
Oh, you were good saying they're on the tape, you're using the criminal.
Okay. Can you call them stupid instead? Okay, all right.
Is the line somewhere around you've undermined your partnership and your ability to work together?
Okay, all right. That's a great answer. It really is. Okay, yeah.
Well, I don't think we should be talking about them as potentially committing crimes unless you have evidence.
Okay.
Like, that is seriously problematic, I would say.
Okay, good. Okay, all right. It hurts your working relationships, obviously, with the others. But what else does that kind of behavior do?
Undermines public confidence.
Yeah, it underlines public confidence, yeah.
I think you're part of the problem. You're not doing anything to further the solution.
Okay. Good answer. Anybody else? What I'm getting at here is I wish somebody had put together an equivalent of this. Has anybody ever served on a board for a nonprofit? Many of you have. Okay. I used to teach nonprofit law at Hamlin, and there's this absolutely gorgeous booklet that's put out by the Attorney General's office in Minnesota, and it's called The Duties of Board Members for people who are on boards for charities and nonprofits. And this is sort of my discussion I'm taking us here to on boards and committees and governance in terms of what makes for an effective board member. I'm going to come back to that question in a second here. But notice under B here, I have three basic duties in terms of what we think it means to be an effective board member. Okay. The first is that under the law, and the Attorney General has said this about nonprofits, and I think the same thing applies to the government, we have a duty of care. What does that duty of care mean, for example? I love this phrase. We have a duty to direct things in terms of, and to direct and protect. Our job is to what? As a board member, it's to direct, to give guidance to staff. And we're going to come back to that whole discussion of our relationship between staff and us in a few minutes here. Our job on serving on these commissions is what? Is broader policy, is broader advice. It's not our job to go out there and actually do X unless there's something in our job description. It's the sense of direction, but it's also the sense of protection. Protecting the integrity of the board, protecting the integrity of the city of Redwood. But the other thing that it's about also is it's about doing your homework. Again, if I can draw a parallel to nonprofits for a second here, is that, I've advised a zillion nonprofits over time. And oftentimes nonprofits will come to me and say, gosh, we want to put a bunch of really rich people on the board so they can give us lots of money. We're not going to ask them to do any kind of board preparation whatsoever. Just sit there and hope that they'll give us lots of money. And people ask me, say, is that a good idea? And I'll say, no. Under state law, board members, to do their job, have a duty of care to do their homework. Think about this also in a parallel sense here. Part of being on a board is not what? Not just to write something on your resume so you have something that looks good on your tombstone or in your obituary someday. Is that part of why you're doing what you're doing here is also what? It's also because you're serving the public. It means what? You have homework to do. A lot of times you're going to have to what? Read things, prepare things, be engaged. You have to show up and what? Actually ask questions. You know, I tell people that I'm from New York, you know, and I tell people that being from New York, there's sort of two characteristics of New Yorkers. One, if you disagree with somebody or somebody disagrees with you, you just think it's because they're hard of hearing, so you increase the volume. But the second thing is about coming from New York. I'm comfortable with disagreement. And I know when I first moved out here, and I've been out in Minnesota now for 33 years, I'm almost qualified, I think, to be a Minnesotan now, but I'm not sure, is that one of my favorite phrases that I liked a long time ago, when someone said to me about being a Minnesotan, quintessential Minnesotan is the language that says, I was so mad, I almost said something. And what I mean about that is that the duty of care, I know we'd love to reach consensus on everything, but duty of care also means what? In a respectful way, doing our homework, asking questions, being engaged, talking to others on the board. You know, just sitting there isn't good enough. You actually have to do something as part of your job. So one, we have a duty of care. Second, it's loyalty. It's this idea of what? Not bad-mouthing other people. Not bad-mouthing the body that you're on. Not as I say it here, engaging in self-dealing. Getting on some commission and saying, wow, this is a really good idea. This is a really good opportunity here. I'm going to do it myself or something like that. It's about, at the end of the day, saying, I'm loyal to the group. I'm loyal to the organization. We're here doing certain kinds of things to help the city. Third, in terms of a duty is what? Obedience. That we're expected to follow the rules. Yeah. We can have a great discussion, but we can't do it today. We can have a great discussion all about civil disobedience. That if I'm just an average citizen and I don't agree with something, can I go disobey the laws in form of a protest? Okay, great debate, don't want to have it today. But when we serve on a board, we're taking that oath, aren't we? Yeah, and I can tell people, sometimes if you decide that the oath you can't live up to, you're not willing to do that job, well, it's probably time to go out do something else in life. But at some point you have to follow those rules, have to go along with them. Additionally, we can describe this as saying what? Overall, that we have a fiduciary duty to the city, to the board, to perform these duties of care, loyalty, obedience. The law requires us to do that. It requires us to be more than just a toadstool, to do something as part of our job. But also, I want to throw in another question, going back to 2A here. What factors make for an effective board? And for all of you, if I can just ask for a couple minutes here. And again, I know we got people on sustainability, I've got some people probably on planning commission, and who knows whatever else is out there. Just a couple of quick minutes here. What are the characteristics of people who you would describe, or let me rephrase it, what are the characteristics that you would describe that make for somebody who's effective on a board? What would you be looking for? Yeah. Okay, fairness, give everybody a chance to give their opinion. What else?
Curiosity.
Curiosity is always good. Asking lots of questions. I was going to say quickly once. I had somebody I was working with once who they had an auditor come in to look at their organization as required by law. And the person said to me, God, I can't stand my auditor. And I said, why? And they said, the auditor asks 100 questions, asks everything, and is skeptical. And I said, God, give me the name of your auditor. You got a great one. And it's the same thing here. There's nothing wrong with you being skeptical, asking lots of questions. Because part of what? Doing your job is to be what? If I can throw in one characteristic, knowledgeable. Having the information you need to make good decisions. Someone had their hand up here. I cut it off for a second. Yeah, go ahead.
have to be open-minded.
Yeah, open-minded. But what does that mean? Does that mean that you have no beliefs whatsoever? No. Okay. What would open-minded actually mean then to you?
It would mean that you're open to new ideas, that you're
Okay.
gonna not just shut down anything that comes in front of you because it's not your belief. You should be open-minded to listen.
Okay, okay. Does open-minded also mean, just for sake of argument here, neutral? No. Why not? Can't be neutral? Okay, okay,
You
okay.
can have an opinion and still be interested in hearing in others and possibly having that change your view.
Okay, good, great answer, yeah. Yeah, because I was going to say, for many of you, I'm assuming most of you, the reason why you're on a board, commission, or something, why? You're interested in something. You're passionate. You care about something. You care about what? About the environment or the city of Red Wing or something like that. So you bring something with you. But you have to be right. Open to perhaps the possibility that maybe somebody else has a better idea or another perspective. Good. What else? Other characteristics of being effective.
How about empathy?
Empathy is not a bad answer here. Empathy and compassion, being able to sort of understand what other people are feeling or thinking, perhaps, or caring about others. Not a bad answer. Okay, what else? Yeah.
Bringing up experience from outside to have some skills of board needs or group needs.
Okay, good. Okay. Drawing upon some of those outside skills. We're hoping that most of us, what we bring to our work, what we bring to our commissions is what? Some life experiences, some background, some insights that'll help inform how decisions are made. Great answer. Okay. Other things we can think of. Yeah.
Consensus builder.
Consent. Yes, I was going to say. This gets us into a whole different discussion here. I was talking about yesterday for a whole different talk here. Is that, and I hope it's not here, but we seem to have a characteristic at the national level of people running for office on all sides of saying that if elected, I'm going to get those dirty, rotten scoundrels on the other side, and because they're, they spit at babies and they pull cats' tails, whatever like that. I mean, they say all kinds of horrible things. But what do we know about what really makes for effective boards, for effective councils? Compromise, negotiation, listening to others, perhaps? Yeah.
And having others, having people on the board not all be your friends.
Yeah.
Have a variety.
Yeah, I was going to say, is that there's an unfortunate, I say this sometimes as a joke here, that oftentimes when we say to people, be reasonable, what we really mean is saying is what? Agree with me. No. In reality, none of us have, as far as I know, a monopoly on the truth. None of us know everything. None of us see the same thing that everybody else does. We look at the world through our own eyes, through our own lenses, through our own experiences. And maybe there are other people in town who have different observations. So being open to that, open to the idea that somebody else's views, even if you disagree with them, those are valid experiences that they have. And they might help us be able to make better decisions. Good. Anything else we can think of? Yeah.
I don't know if it's been said, but don't you say independence of mind?
Yeah.
And courage.
Yeah, I was going to say, independence of mind is always good. Not being sort of, wedded to something, but courage too. I think it's an often unappreciated idea that at some point we don't have the leisure, I think, to duck making choices. Part of what we're expected to do in our position is what? Serving the people, is to make those choices. Somewhere in here, by the way, that I was talking about values, maybe being in public, we didn't mention another one, accountability. At the end of the day, is that, is we all have to be accountable, and the public has a right to say, we don't like, oh, great, thanks. We don't like certain things, and if we don't like what you're doing, we're going to vote you out, run against you, replace you, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, good. Okay. Anybody else? Yeah.
Acceptance.
I'm sorry, pardon me?
Acceptance. You need to be able to accept decisions that may go against you. You have to be able to accept other points of view, so.
Yeah, I was gonna say, that gets back to my concept here of loyalty. At the end of the day, of saying that, yeah, maybe I'm on the losing side of a 5-4 vote. I don't win all the time. But guess what? As long as it's a fair debate, as long as people had a chance to listen, yeah. Respect the integrity of the process. That's important. Good. Others? Yeah.
Discernment?
Yeah, it's a great answer. And why do you think I like that answer. Oh, elaborate.
Sometimes we hear, we only hear complaints and we don't hear from the people that are saying that's a really good idea because they expect us to make, the decision that is going to be most effective for everyone. And
Right. Yeah. And with that also, if I can sort of twist it a little bit here, is one of the problems we oftentimes have, and cognitive psychologists would talk about this, we only want to hear the things that reinforce our pre-existing beliefs. That we sort of discount things that we don't believe in, et cetera, et cetera. So maybe this fits to the discernment, the openness to a whole bunch of different characteristics here of recognizing the fact that maybe what? Maybe somebody else has a perspective we should listen to. Okay, all of these are good. All of these are good in terms of again, what makes for an effective board member. With that, I throw into here our discussion again of what? Our discussion of saying that somewhere encapsulated here, if I'm describing the characteristics of a good board member, again, in other ways, it's that fiduciary duty to serve the public. To serve the public also means what? Respecting the Constitution, the laws, and so forth, respecting the basic core values of what? Transparency, openness, accountability. It includes what? The duties of loyalty, the duties of care and of obedience. Okay. All those, I think, again, capture for us some of what we should be thinking about in terms of characteristics of a good board member. Okay. Now, I didn't bring it with me tonight. Many, many years ago, I did training at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and somebody brought in the coolest little prop in the world. They brought in a set of mixing bowls. And you're thinking, why is that a cool prop? And what they did on the mixing bowls is put masking tape there. And what they put on the masking tape on the biggest bowl was something that said values. The second bowl they put on there was they said mission. The third that they had there was on the third bowl that said policy, and then I can't remember what they put on the fourth bowl. And what's characteristic about when you buy mixing bowls? They all fit together, one inside another. And what this person said to me is that really effective organizations do a couple of things. First, all the bowls reinforce one another. We go from the values that are important to our mission, to our policies, maybe to our procedures, maybe to our programs, et cetera, et cetera. But the second thing that she said, and I ask it here, is she was asking the question, for those of us who serve on boards, who serve on commissions, which bowl are we operating in? If I can use my metaphor here. Is it our job to get down to the point of where we're actually performing tasks or telling staff what to do or supervising staff? What do you view?
Depends on the commission.
It does depend on the commission, of course. It depends on your charge. But in general, what would you say is your job when you serve on these commissions or boards? What are you actually doing? Yeah.
Reflect the values.
Yeah, reflect values. Okay, good. What else?
You're making decisions based on the input that you get from staff.
Okay, good. Okay. And then what is staff hopefully asking you to do?
Guide them.
Guide them. Yeah. Okay, good. Let's see.
Well, it's important also what not to do, which is not micromanage, which we put in the context.
Yeah. One of the hardest things, we all get passionate. We all get really excited about what we're doing. It's figuring out how to draw those boundaries between what? Directing, between setting broader policy, between giving broader guidance, and at the same time what? At the same time trying to figure out at what point does it carry over to staff in terms of what they're supposed to do. And again, a couple of thoughts here in terms of thinking about this issue here, in terms of what makes for an effective board versus staff. Again, generally, as I say here, this is on Roman numeral 2, C, board staff. Generally, board versus staff, generally our job is making policy or recommendations that are fairly broad, because staff is going to come to us looking at us as what? As either for advising or as decision makers. And they're going to be asking for some sense to say, what should we do in terms of helping to get our 2040 plan? What should we be doing in terms of perhaps downtown development or something like that? They're going to be looking for you to become, in many ways, the voices of the community. Not your job, generally, to actually go out and do that work, but to provide that guidance, that input. And that's what I want us to be thinking about here, is how do we draw, or I'll ask it to you here, how do you folks yourselves think about drawing those lines to figure out what's your job versus what staff is supposed to do? Because this is a tough problem, by the way, that lots of organizations have, figuring out those boundary lines. Any thoughts on how you sort of navigate it? Or don't you think it's a problem? Yeah.
I think the board is a level of governance and oversight versus operational to the staff.
Okay. So yours is more governance as opposed to operational staff. Okay, good. All right. Yeah.
It certainly is my perception that in Redmond, the city council is a tool of the staff rather than the governing body.
Okay.
It's supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
Some people like that, some people don't, but
okay.
it's objective.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Okay. But I think there's a complex relationship, actually, isn't there? A relationship where council, not full time, has to rely upon what? Has to rely upon, let's say, the staff to provide some information. Maybe it relies upon, I'll say staff to provide some information. Staff then goes back to council and says, here's some important information you want. Give us some kind of guidance. Isn't that also what they're doing with you on the various commissions and boards? Is that they're not asking you to go out and gather the information yourself. That's not your task. It's not your job to go out there and snoop around, get it. It's to what? It's to get the information through staff. It's to ask them inquiries. It's to have them help you do your job. And so this is what we're trying to think about here. And maybe for some, the perception is, and I don't know if it's true or not, I'm not going to venture into this here, but maybe the perception is, that for some people, that maybe staff has too much power or something like that. But I think it's actually a more nuanced relationship in terms of how staff interacts with council for providing information. Okay. And guidance. All right. Others commenting on this? Yeah.
I'm on a commission that has the opposite. I mean, sister cities. And our difficulty is part of our activities are governance.
Okay.
But there's a part of our activities that's working board. Yes, we have a staff member who is our staff liaison.
Okay.
But that's not her job.
Okay.
I mean, she's got a whole other job, that probably a full-time job, and what she does for us.
Okay.
Is not always the going out and gathering of information. That's something that our board members are often doing.
Okay.
So that's another staff relationship, and I don't know if other commissions have it. I know other commissions, for instance, have paid staff members.
All right.
And yes, absolutely, send the staff member out to do the legwork, but we don't have that luxury, I don't believe. I think we'd be imposing upon city staff if we asked her to do all of that.
Okay. That's a possibility, yeah.
There's also trust issues where you have a like with the boards, we have confidence, public confidence, but with staff, you can have problems with, are they providing the correct information, or are they leaving things out, or, for instance, with the state body, I've had cases with accidents who represented things. So, are you getting the information, and is the information right?
Okay, okay, good. Anybody else? Yeah, go ahead.
And it's not the relationship of staff to one person, it's to the entire board.
Yes. Yeah, that's very important to understand also, is you're right, is that the staff is there to serve the board, not to serve any one particular person. Exactly, good observation here, yeah.
I think too, our board's mission is economic.
Okay.
Board members come and go.
Uh-huh.
With some real frequency.
Okay.
We have to rely on the knowledge and the professionalism of the staff that we have.
Right.
To lead us in a lot of areas.
Uh-huh.
Because they've seen it for 10 or 15 or 20 years.
Right.
Where the commissioners maybe have been on the board members maybe have been on the peripheral edges of it.
Uh-huh.
But don't have all the factual information that our staff does.
Okay, okay. All right. And shouldn't we also, in many cases, I'm wondering, making our decisions based upon what? Relevant facts also? Facts that maybe are gathered not by me going around on my own gathering it, but maybe upon sort of common facts, common information that all of us can share? Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Part of the nuance is that the staff are full-time, they've been there for a long time, they know, a lot of the ins and outs of the city and province.
Right.
And to say that the boards or commissions are guiding the staff, the knowledge base is so, and the expertise base is so lopsided that it's hard to think of it that that's actually happening.
Okay.
It's just, in practicality, it's just really easy for the staff to guide the board.
Okay.
Because of the way they give the information, because of the predisposed, opinions and experience. So it seems like it's kind of a tricky deal.
Okay, okay. So what should you do in that situation if you feel like, if you think the staff is, I'll say, pushing you around too much?
Well, you can talk about it, but, I mean, that's always a topic for discussion. I'm just saying that the way the structure is.
Okay.
Is inherently problematic.
Okay. Way back. Okay. We're going way back.
The decisions that we make are based on the knowledge that we have.
Right.
So, and based off the knowledge we have, then, presents our perception or point of view or understanding of something. So, when you present an issue to a board, you're asking for some feedback or direction as it's being interpreted by someone else.
Okay.
Because it's not to say that my interpretation is perfectly fits.
Sure.
Okay, there could be some other circumstance that I don't see.
Right.
So that's why I would present that out to get feedback to find out how to handle a certain situation that would have multiple viewpoints, or that could help with multiple viewpoints to see how that fits.
Okay, good. Someone else had their hand up over here, I think.
Well, you started about the bowl.
Uh-huh.
And to me, it all centers around, yes, it all centers around working together. And I hear, I hear that in everything that people have said. The staff does need to supply the basic knowledge, but then the board needs to, they need to take that knowledge and verify it, but then to follow it. But going back to that bowl, I thought that was such a good illustration.
Yeah.
How it all fits, it all has to fit together.
Yeah.
You have to have the policies and it just, I can't say anything different, but I went together.
Yeah.
And if the, if the staff are not following what has already been determined, or if the board is not watching, or listening carefully,
Right.
It's gonna fold.
Yes,
You're
yeah.
gonna have a collapsible plastic wall.
Yeah, and part of what I want to hit at here, and again, I have to move on to other topics, this is kind of like sort of the Cliff Notes version of something that would take a long time. And if you have no idea what Cliff Notes is, it's time for me to retire or anything like that. But part of what I like about the bowl analogy also is part of, what do you figure out which bowl you're operating in? That's part of what? Your charge as a board. That's part of your charge in a commission, of understanding that are you at that outer board? Are you at outer bowl, middle board, like that? And one of the things I'm always a big believer in is understanding what? What is your charge? What is your mission? That we always need to be coming back and asking, what are you asked to do? All right. Okay, I want to move on to Roman numeral 3, Minnesota Open Meetings Law. But to do that, let's go to page 6. Okay, my bottom of the page, some hypotheticals here. You're serving on a Red Wing board or commission and are very excited about a new proposal coming before your body. You're so excited, in fact, you decide to call several of the members of the board or commission to discuss some ideas you have, hoping to get a better idea on how best to amend the proposal or to improve it. Doesn't that sound like a really good idea? No. No? Oh my gosh, what's wrong with that? That sounds like a great idea to me, especially, gosh, some of these, I really don't want to waste a lot of time at the board, and it may be really controversial. So this might be a good way of avoiding some controversy or fights and saving a little bit of time. Let's just have a few phone calls and resolve this. Okay. Sounds like a good idea to me, isn't it to you? Oh, gee. Okay. Yeah. What's wrong with that? Serial meeting, okay. But even before we come to the serial meeting problem, why is doing this wrong? No transparency. Yeah. I mean, think about it. If we're conducting the public's business, doesn't the public have a right to hear what's going on and to participate in it? Yes. Okay. I'm going to do a couple other variations of this here. So, for example, you socially run into another board member at a coffee shop, and while you're hanging out there, you decide it'd be a great time to talk shop about the coming agenda items. You reach agreement on a couple of ideas and say, here's some ways to proceed or something like that with the new proposal. Is that a good idea? No. Why not? You're a party pooper. You're ruining it for everything for me, something like that. Okay, why not? Who said no? Was it you or who was it? Okay, you. Okay. What's wrong with that?
You're doing this outside of the meeting.
Okay.
It's outside of the context of everyone being included in that discussion.
Okay. And just to be silly here, and the problem is? It's not open. Yes, coming back to that basic point I was making here, does the public have a right to know what's going on? The answer is yes. Okay, so let's look at here Roman numeral 3. Okay, we start with some presumptions here. Again, if we start with a basic value, which is why I started with our discussion of values today. One of those values is what? Openness and transparency. The public has a right not just to know what the final decision is, but to understand and know the decision-making process getting to the point of where you reach the final decision, because that's equally as important. There's a presumption in Minnesota law that under state law, all public meetings are open to the public with notice. Now, while the law is not clear in its definition, we can say a public meeting is anybody that conducts business or functions for the public benefit, which means it's incredibly broad in terms of what we mean for a public meeting or a public body, which includes what? Not just county commissions, not just city councils. It includes not just, it also includes, by the way, boards and commissions, et cetera, et cetera. All right. Now, conducting the business includes what? As I said here, it's arriving at a decision. That is, we vote X, Y. It's also informational meetings. And so I know many of you might be tempted to say, well, gosh, I'm just gonna call one or two other commission members and just get some information for them to help me make up my mind or something like that. Informational meetings are also covered under that. Additionally, any discussion of public issues, that are coming before your board. Again, can you hang out with can you run into another board member socially and complain about the weather? Yes. Can you complain about the Twins? Yes. In fact, I think it's required to do so. Can you maybe carp in general about government or taxes, whatever like that? Yes, you can. But when you start talking about business of your board, then we're starting to get into the issues here of what? About it perhaps looking like a public meeting. And it doesn't have to be just with the majority of the board members. It could be less than a majority. Okay. I point out here, public meetings does not include a chance or social gatherings. So if all of you happen to show up for a birthday party and you're cutting cake, drinking coffee, or something like that, that's perfectly okay. It doesn't preclude doing those kind of things. But again, if your conversation starts to turn to what? Starts to turn to the business that would normally be something that your public body would be engaging in, then we now start to get into the question of whether or not you're violating public meetings. Now, in general, under state law, as I mentioned to you, the presumption is all public meetings or all public bodies the meetings are open to the public. There are a narrow band of exceptions. And I'm going to tell you now that if you're thinking of closing a meeting, you don't do it on your own. You do this in consultation with city staff or city attorney. I would never, ever actually say you should do it yourself. But just to give you an idea, what are those narrow exceptions? Okay, narrow exceptions, for example, for labor negotiations. If it's actually, you're doing collective bargaining with like the union or something like that, or employee evaluations. If any of you happen to be on some board or commission or on the council itself, where you're actually doing, let's say, a staff evaluation, that's okay. Again, labor negotiations, security issues are always appropriate in terms of saying we've got some kind of public security question here. Property transactions, those are okay. And then limited attorney-client privilege. But as I say to you, always consult with the city attorney or the irrelevant staff person. Don't just say on yourself, well, guess what? I think this is really important. So important that we have to discuss it in private or something like that. That's a call that you want to rely upon the people who are actually who are, let's say, legally advising the city, because there's huge legal implications for doing that. Okay, now another variation I want to get at here. Last question on page 6 here. We're on to. By the way, is there any question on sort of the public meeting? Again, I know I'm going quickly here. Yeah.
If you have committees within your board,
yeah.
Can they get together and talk about it, or is that?
If they are committees of the board, they are also covered by the open meetings law, which means those committees also must be open to the public with notice, and you can't sort of discuss kind of this material in private. Yes, so it extends to everything. Now, if on the other hand, a bunch of you have let's say you have 4 people on your commission who get together and play bridge. God bless America if you have time to play bridge. I wish I did too, or something like that. But you're not supposed to be but a bridge club, as far as I know, is not a subcommittee of a larger body or something like that. You can get together and play bridge, but you're also at that point not supposed to what? Talk about the business of the board. But yes, any subcommittee is also included. And again, keep in mind, it doesn't just have to be a majority, because one of the more frequent ways that the law gets violated in the state is what's called the serial meeting. What I decide to do is get on the phone, or I can call one other board member, or I send an email to another board member. That board member then maybe sends an email or calls somebody else, et cetera, et cetera. In some situations, even when you have less than a quorum, that kind of serial effort to try to gather information, to try to arrive at a decision, to try to reach some kind of consensus, is a violation of the open meetings law. Yeah.
I just want a real clarification of this. 2 board or commission members cannot have coffee and talk about issues without violating the open meeting law?
It is very difficult to do that, yes. You can maybe at most, okay, I take a very conservative view on the law here in terms of saying that I believe that the presumption is public has a right to know. Now, can you call staff, ask staff a lot of questions? Yes, of course, no question about that, okay. That's not considered to be a public meeting at that point. But if the purpose of your meeting is either to try to arrive at a final decision or taking preparatory steps to arrive at a final decision, then those conversations would be considered to be a violation of the open meeting law.
Thank you.
Yeah. Now again, I'm the first to say, by the way, I take when I say an exceedingly conservative position, part of it's based upon the case law in Minnesota, but also the idea of saying that in general, these are the kind of conversations that, think about it on the flip side here. How many of us over time have ever been in the situations where we felt like we've gone to a meeting and said, God, I feel like it's already been decided. I feel like they've already reached their decision or something like that. And how do you feel? You feel like your input didn't matter. You feel like the decision's not legitimate, et cetera, et cetera. Put yourself in that situation here. Think about how the public would view your decisions. I didn't talk about this so much before, but when I started off my talk here today, I used to be the executive director for Common Cause Minnesota for many years, a group that worked on openness, openness in government, ethics in government, campaign finance. I used to have state legislators when we would testify about things that would say to me, that's not how it is. That's just how it appears. And I would turn to him and say, guess what? For the public, appearance is reality. What they see, however well-informed or not well-informed, is what's reality for them. And if they get the sense that Floyd and Barney, or Andy and Barney, whatever it is like that, have already had this communication and they've already looked like they've resolved things or talked things through, it really undermines that faith in the decision-making process. Yeah.
And, I agree with that, and at the same time, the public might have missed all of the opportunities to have input in that meeting where that final meeting was. It looks like it's already been decided. So there's a lot of times there's many steps where people can be involved, but if you don't go to any of those and just go to the last one, then it looks like it's been decided. So it's a real mix.
You're absolutely right. And also I'll add to that, on top of which, I'm one of those kind of people who doesn't view public input as a nuisance. It's kind of like, I know some people say, God, it'd be so easy to do this job if we didn't have to listen to the public. We could just sort of get our decisions done or something like that and move on. No, again, because it's a public body, what? The public has a right to participate, but also, guess what? There are lots of people who might be able to, on top of which, offer input or ideas that will improve the quality of our decision-making and also invest them in the decision-making. So that's an important thing to think about here also. I think somebody else had their hand up. Way up in the back here. Go ahead, yeah.
Well, we have in Red Wing, City Council uses a lot of what they call ad hoc committees, which are committees that address a specific issue and they'll come back and they'll provide a report to the rest of the City Council. And it's always a less than quorum committee size. What you're saying then, what I'm hearing is, unless these meetings are noticed and the public is made aware of when and where the meetings are taking place, it shouldn't be happening. Is that correct?
Yes, correct.
All right, good
Yeah.
to know.
Yeah, no, again, I take a pretty strict view of the law here that says that and I think I can support it with case law, that says that those ad hoc committees, think about it. What if council, let's say, evil genius council wants to get around public scrutiny. So they say, we're going to create lots of little two-person ad hoc councils or ad hoc meetings or groups to resolve and talk about a whole bunch of things. They're going to be able to do what? Be able to arrive at and finish all the decisions without ever actually having to make it public. And it's the same thing with your boards and commissions. And by the way, it doesn't matter whether you're paid or not. And that's an important thing to think about here too. Just because, and I don't know how many of you are not compensated in the work that you do. I know sometimes some commissions have a little bit of compensation or something like that. But even if you're not compensated, these rules still apply. You know, that the sense in which, think of, again, piecemealing out the decisions, saying, well, we're only going to talk about this little thing. It's not really an official meeting. Public doesn't need to be involved or something like that. No, that's a way of getting around the law. And the Minnesota Supreme Court has actually been very, very strict, you know, on these issues. Good. Okay, somebody else had their hand up. Yeah.
So, having spent a lifetime in management and going to lots of meetings and being a brand new member of a board, I'm 71. Using your rules, I have no chance in my lifetime of catching up on the board that I'm at if I can't get information from board members outside of the meetings. And I've been there for a year now, and most of the things that are discussed, I have almost no grip on at all, because I don't get back quickly.
Where can you get information from?
No place.
Yeah. Where? Staff, or at public meetings. Staff is there to what? Call them up and ask them where you can get this kind of, where you can get information on X, Y, and Z. That's their job to do that, to help provide you with those kind of resources. And that's the important thing to think about here, is that yes, you can catch up. In my ideal world, by the way, I would be saying, I think your mayor mentioned this, we'd be doing what? You'd be doing what? Perhaps yearly orientations for new board members. You would come on, you would do things where you sort of say, you know, here's your mission, here's your charge, et cetera, like that. I mean, that's what I advise with organizations, not just governments, to say that there has to be a constant refreshing as new board members come on, that new member packet, et cetera, like that. I also think that it's useful every year, in my view, that whatever commission you're on, maybe each meeting, depending on what it is, take a few minutes and talk about maybe one of the goals of your organization. Or what I sometimes tell people is maybe take a time once a year where you talk amongst yourself and with the public. What's the mission? What are the goals of your organization? What you're supposed to be doing? So that all of you are on the same page, and at the same time, the public knows what you're supposed to be doing. Because you're right, constant flux, constant change, et cetera, et cetera. Somebody else, I think way back there, yeah.
I have a question that relates to the open meeting law and quorums.
Okay.
So there was an example where we had a public forum in Red Wing, and there was a commission member who came and actually felt like they had to leave because there were too many members of their commission already there and no quorum notice had been put out.
Yeah.
It wasn't an organized, anybody from the community could have come up. And so I just want to get some clarification on that.
That's a really good question here, because from a legal, again, I'm a law professor, I'm a lawyer too, so I think I can sort of speak to this. There are two minds to this, and I don't have the right answer to this question here, because I've seen some cities say that, okay, so we're going to do, I don't know, some type of public event, and let's say an award ceremony, and we invite all the council members and the mayor, and they all show up. And many of them will say, well, gosh, there's no problem with, let's say, giving out awards to, I don't know, Citizen of the Year awards or Community Residents of the Year awards, something like that, because we're not conducting any business, we're not conducting any, arriving at any decisions. But I've also seen some cities that say that, well, anytime we have a majority of our council here, that automatically gets this potentially to a violation of open meetings. I don't think that's the case myself. I think it's only if the majority is there, if they're conducting business. I also think it doesn't matter if it's a majority or not. If you had a minority of the board member there, but you were still conducting business, that's still a problem. So I think it's about the purpose, the content of what's being discussed. But again, this is where I would again come back and say that if you're thinking of doing an event where you're saying, we're going to have, let's say, all the members of our body come together for, I don't know, some award ceremony or something like that. I'm hoping, of course, you're coordinating with staff or something like that. This isn't what we're doing. But again, to me, I think it's more important. It's about the content, not the number of people who show up. Because if it was the number, then serial meetings wouldn't be illegal. Does that make sense? Yeah, I think it's the content of what's being discussed. But again, not every city reaches that conclusion. Some take an even, I'll say, more restrictive view that says majority of council members can't be together. I don't agree with that, but I'm not going to second guess a city on that. Good, all right, yeah.
What would you say about a situation where, say, a city council is conscientious about noticing its meetings?
Right.
But is not conscientious or even does it at all about subcommittees or subcommittees of that council? Not only either doesn't announce them or perhaps does it with a notice put on the bulletin board in the attic, so to speak.
Yeah, yeah.
Or doesn't even have a listing of its committees and who's on them.
Yeah, yeah. Again, I think my reading first off of the open meetings law requires what? All meetings have to have notice, which includes subcommittees, advisory groups, et cetera, like that. Now, you don't have to have a notice. For example, let's see, Councilmember Schultz is going to meet with the, I don't know, we'll say he's going to meet with the Parks and Rec director. Does that require meeting notice? No, it's not a meeting at that point. But meetings all meetings do require notice. Now, do I also think that the law requires or should require that we have listings of all the members? Yeah. I think I'm not sure if that comes under the open meetings law or what it comes under, but yes, it's nice to know who the public officials are. All right, can we move on? All right, good. All right, let's get into the sort of public information and data practices. All right, bottom of page 6 again. You send an email to another board member discussing a coming agenda item. Is the email public information? And then with that, what if the email was sent from a private email account? It doesn't matter. Why not?
Depends on the information, not.
Okay, that's important here. That's important here. Think about it to start with here. A couple of different things here. Is that if the presumption's going to be under open meetings law, or rather under the Data Practices Act, then the Data Practices Act presumes all information held by the government or conducted by the government is public unless specifically designated as not. Again, basically we're going to presume that all the information government has is public. That includes what? Correspondence between city officials and one another, generally. It's going to include email correspondences between what? Between, let us say, staff and you, because it's on their servers. It could, in many situations, also be what? Situations where people try to avoid using the public servers and say, well, heck, I think I'm going to get smart. I'm going to bypass using official Red Wing email, and I'm going to use my private emails so I can do certain kinds of things or transpire some kind of information. All that's still public. Additionally, for those of you who are serving in your official capacity, comments of citizens to you, of residents to you, when you're operating in your official capacity on boards, are also considered to be what? Public information. Because again, what do we consider? First, we're saying what? The public has a right to know. But two, think about the public has a right to know perhaps who's influencing you, what communications are important that are influencing your decisions, et cetera, et cetera. Now, I also want to say that to do a full class on the Minnesota Data Practices Act, we would be here for about a month. For even the people who are experts on this, this is an incredibly complex area. All I want you to understand from our discussion here is think about how data practices goes hand in hand with the open meetings law. The idea of the presumption, all of your correspondence conducting the public's business. Public gets to have that information if they want to inspect it, yeah.
Can you use the words held by the government? And so that does that mean that as individuals serving on a commission then we are regarded as the government, held by the government?
Yeah,
Okay.
yes, correct.
It sounds like if the city had a city server and board and council members were on that and they sent messages there and those messages were accessible to anybody in the city, that would get around most of these laws.
No, in fact, at that point, it would mean what? Because they're conducting the public's business, they're even more prime to be accessing them. And I could, as Schultz, come in and say, I want, through basically data practices, I want all the emails between Smith and Jones.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
They should be there, just so they can have it, period.
Yeah, okay, maybe I misunderstood your question, I'm
No,
sorry.
I'm saying it should be wide open, any communications.
Yes, correct, yeah, absolutely correct, okay, yeah.
So, are you presuming that we all have city email addresses?
No, I'm not,
Then I can never use my private email to correspond with another board member. Who also has a private email, by the way, because we don't have city email.
If you do that, then what are you doing? You're violating open meetings law, potentially. So I would say that even if you're using your private emails to conduct or communicate public business, that gets into at least violation of the open meetings law. It could very well mean that those communications are still subject to data practices, which means the public would have a right to access them. Yeah.
Would it be a violation of open meetings if, say, a non-board member brought up something on Facebook, something that the council was talking about, and several council members come in and comment, where they're discussing this topic?
Ooh. So somebody complains about, I don't know, 3rd Street, when's that construction going to be done, right? Or something like that.
Yeah,
And they do it on-
something that I'm thinking of an example in my head, but
Yeah,
I
okay.
don't want to get too detailed.
Sure.
An item that was going forward with city council. Non-board member brought it up on Facebook. Several board members are commenting on it along with the public.
Okay. We could ask a few different questions about that. You know, first, and I don't want to say that public board members shouldn't comment right off the bat, but should you go off on your own and comment and act as if you're speaking for the board? No, I don't think you should. I think if somebody is asking X, Y, and Z or commenting on something on Facebook, even if you want to say, well, I'm just speaking on my own behalf, it's too easy for the public to reach the conclusion and say, well, you're actually speaking on behalf of the board or the organization. So I would resist quite a bit in terms of making those comments there. I would say it might be better off at the next meeting, you know, to talk about those comments. Or maybe at best, I might say on Facebook to those people, show up at the next meeting or bring your concerns, you know, to the next meeting or something like that. But I would be hesitant to do that. But on the other hand, though, I'm speaking in my public capacity. Could we not make the argument then that what? This is, because you're speaking in your public capacity, this is information that should be open to other public, not just those people on Facebook to see.
Even if you have several council
Yeah.
members talking at the same
Yeah,
time?
yeah, okay, yeah.
Something that arises regularly in my experience
Right.
is that, say, environmental regulatory agencies or other entities that issue permits or make land use decisions don't want to release applications of draft permits. They want to keep it as an internal document until they're ready to issue a public notice. But I see no authority in the Data Practices Act for that position. Do you?
I'm not going to try to reach a legal opinion on that because there is some debate in the law regarding whether or not, for staff, whether they have to release things prior to them reaching a final opinion or a final answer. There are some protections that say, within data practices that say, that, let us say, some internal staff deliberations under some circumstances are protected, but oftentimes most of those deliberations are still open, to data practice scrutiny. And the reason why I say that, because it depends on, are there some sensitive questions here about legal opinions? Is someone in terms of the conversation here asking us questions that might be protected by attorney-client confidentiality? Are we talking about issues that might involve what? Land acquisition or something like that. So it's hard for me to give a 100% answer on this one, because it depends on the nature of the conversations that are going on within there. I'm stealing an answer for Don Gemberling, who for 40 years was the chief person in Minnesota who oversaw the Data Practices Act. And so he's the one who sort of gave me that answer, and I'll follow Don's answer. Yeah.
Before we leave the open meeting discussion and go to conflict of interest,
Yeah.
I think is where you're headed.
Yeah, I want to get to a couple minutes of that.
I have a question about consequence. Whether with malice or not, if there's a violation of the open meeting law, so what? What is the consequence? What are the consequences?
Well, in some situations, depending on the, do you want to say something?
No.
Okay. In some situations, violations of the open meetings law can lead to the state moving or to what? In some situations, can lead to what? State removal of members. There are, I can't remember what the fines are. There's some pretty hefty fines associated with the violation of the open meetings law. If you have conducted business in violation of the open meetings law, those decisions that are reached potentially can be overturned. So the consequences are actually quite severe.
We don't hear about that part.
Yeah.
We're told about the open meetings law,
Right.
but never really talk about, it's like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to
Yeah,
do
no. There are clear legal consequences associated with this. Again, when I was working with Maplewood, what was stunning a decade, almost 10 years ago, is that in one of the interviews with the mayor, I wasn't even expecting this. She confesses to me and says, "Oh yeah, we regularly conduct business like that," and said this to me. She eventually faced numerous lawsuits, both personally and the city faced lawsuits for the violations of those laws. And so yeah, there are consequences. This is not just Boy Scout honor system. There are consequences for violation.
And if you attend one of the iPad workshops, you hear about these things that have happened within cities that should not have happened.
Yeah, great, good, all right. Last sort of topic I want to talk about. Yeah, go ahead, last quick comment here.
Yeah, if someone calls a commissioner and a public citizen calls you at your place of work outside of meeting hours, how do you handle that? Do you listen to them or do they influence you on what your decision making will be?
Yeah, it's a great transition. If you're on a public body and the public calls you and says, "I want to talk to you about something," does the public have a right to do that? God bless America. Yeah, they do. And
Record it or whatever for.
well, if it's you don't have to record it, of course. But if it is recorded, it may become part of the public record, or if they emailed you or something like that. But yes, they have a right to do it. But let us say now, I can twist it here. Let us say this person says, "Oh gosh, I want to talk to you about such and such, whatever like that. Let me go out and buy you lunch, and let's go talk about this." doesn't that sound like a really good idea to talk about this over lunch and they're gonna pay for it? Dinner would be better, that's right. All right. Lunch is cheap or something like that. Okay, what I'm getting at is a couple of different things here. Okay, again, in a much longer discussion, we're getting into conflicts of interest here. If I were teaching, let's say, this class here, let's say 50 years ago, I could do a really nice classic discussion of conflict of interest and say, what is a conflict of interest? Is when I use my position or misuse my position for personal financial advantage. For those of us who studied Latin, the law would have said from our personal pecuniary advantage. That it was only a conflict of interest if I somehow said, God, I'm going to use my position to feather bed myself, for personal profit, like that. So somebody tells me something, I say, oh my gosh, that's a really good idea. I'm going to go out now and buy something or do something or something like that. But in a longer discussion, which I can't do today, even though we're running short of time, if I had more time here, we would talk about how conflict of interest isn't just about what? Financial benefit. It's also about what? It's also about what? In the sense of misuse of position, maybe misuse of information. Conflict of interest can be what? I know something in my public capacity, and I use that in an appropriate way. For example, in the course of my job or my course of my board work, I acquire some really juicy information about my next door neighbor. And I go and blab to my friends about it or something like that. That could be what? A misuse of information, a misuse of my position. Or increasingly, what? Conflict of interest is oftentimes viewed as what? Being so biased, so rigid in my thinking that what? That in fact, I no longer can make my decisions in an appropriate way. As I describe it here, we can have, this is on page 4 here, under Roman numeral what? 6D, kinds of conflicts of interest, biased judgment, direct compensation, misuse of position for inappropriate purposes, violation of confidentiality. Again, when I also get back to what? Misuse of information, I should say here, or misuse of position. Again, it's using my position in a way of saying, well, heck, I'm on the planning commission, folks. Don't you know better or something like that? Or you can't do X, Y, and Z because I sit on such and such a body or something like that. Additionally, conflict of interest is not just about what? Real interests, real pecuniary, real financial. Remember again, as I said to you, for the public, perception is reality. We're also concerned about what? The appearance of conflicts of interest. The appearance that something inappropriate is influencing our judgments, or we are somehow inappropriately using our position. Where I want us to draw a reference to here is this discussion of gifts for a few minutes here. Now, I will do a confession here that back in 1994 or so, when Minnesota passed the gift ban law, John Marty was the one who helped push that through. I was actually one of the people who helped push that through. I'm a firm believer in the idea that what? That gifts cause problems. Now, in our private life, is it okay to exchange gifts? Gosh, that's a wonderful virtue, generosity. But what I call, and I gave you an attached article that I did a few years ago, the ethical problem of gifting, is that what? When we accept even small nominal things, cups of coffee, or small gratuities, they cause what I call the Santa Claus problem. And what I mean by that, everybody loves Santa Claus. Why? He gives us a gift. And we don't realize how much those little gifts, those little acts of something like that might bias our judgments, might influence us. And we have incredible psychological evidence that it does. But conversely, think about how the public, even you say, well, gosh, it was only a grilled cheese sandwich and fries, at a Greasy Spoon restaurant. it can't influence me. A, you don't know. But B, what's the public going to think when they see that somebody is interested in some activity, and what? That they're buying you lunch or they're buying you a cup of coffee. I know, I'm pretty strict on this. You know, when I worked in local government, I had a zero gift policy. I think well before state law did that. Yeah, state law allows us to accept, trinkets that don't really have any value. I would, as much as possible, stay away from trying to figure out what has no real value, what is a trinket, et cetera, and say, think about just not accepting gifts. It's not just from lobbyists, but state law also says what? From any interested parties whatsoever. So what I want to get at here is this notion about gifts and conflicts of interest. It poses a problem here, again, under state laws, the Roman numeral 8, under gifts and conflict of interest, Minnesotan gifts. There's a couple of statutes that address it. Keep those in mind. I also want to draw your attention as we're sort of getting to the end of our discussion here. Again, how do we identify conflicts of interest? What I sometimes tell people is people will say, gosh, I don't really have a conflict of interest. I don't really think a small gift, a toasted cheese sandwich, a gratuity is influencing my behavior. When I was growing up, there used to be this phrase that said, people don't have a clue, they don't have a clue. And sometimes conflicts of interest are so insidious that we don't even realize what's happening, what's influencing our decisions. So I always think the problem of biased judgment is significant here. Things that I throw out here, how to address, what are some of the red flags about conflicts of interest? Am I using special information that nobody else has access to? Am I personally profiting? Am I competing with the county or the city? How would things look on the 10 p.m. news or appearances? And then again, how to avoid conflicts of interest? Always ask, what are your conflict of interest policies? Now, I'm a big believer, and I've lost this battle. Statewide, I get interviewed at least 2 or 3 times a year by the media that'll ask about some city, and they say, does this violate conflict of interest law? And I'll kind of sigh, and I'll say, there's no statewide law that governs conflicts of interest in all situations. Yeah, it doesn't look good, it's really pretty bad, but it doesn't per se violate any law. And I come back and say, just because it doesn't violate the law doesn't mean it's not inappropriate, that there are still problems out there. But many cities like Red Wing have conflicts of interest laws, they have personnel policies that are on staff. So always what? Find out when you come on a board, what are the conflict of interest policies? 2, ask always, if you think you've got a conflict of interest, disclosure is the starting point. Always disclose and say, I think I've got a problem. 3rd, ask the classic one that I always learned when I was working in city government, how would it look on 10 p.m. news? And I would add to it, during sweeps month, and since I know Jay Coles from Channel 5, when Jay Coles does the story, because it's not going to look good at that point. When in doubt, seek advice from city attorney or city staff, and I always want to say, if in doubt, if you're not sure if you have a conflict of interest, just don't do it. All right, so my conclusion, or what I bring us up here, is that legal and ethical rules are not a hindrance are not a hindrance to making decisions. They are a way to do what? To improve them, to make them stronger, to build public confidence. Following the law, additionally, is merely the bare minimum necessary to being an ethical and an effective public official, but it's not efficient. As I say to my law students, and I teach legal ethics to law students, I tell people my job is to make sure lawyers don't act badly. Then of course the joke is, Schultz, you've got a lifetime job ahead of you, I know. But I always like to tell people that merely scraping at the bottom, just to do the bare minimum, is not enough. All of you should aspire to do more. And what I hope I've given you here, and certainly in 90 minutes, I can't cover all the issues, cover all the problems, et cetera, et cetera. Maybe at some point, if I pass the audition, your mayor will have me come back and do some things in more detail. I don't know whether I pass the audition or not, but I would be happy to come back and do other stuff, but hopefully at least gives you some starting point for thinking about some issues. Okay, thank you very much.